Hi, my name is Jeremy Putzier, and this is my Media Clip final project presentation. First, we'll start off talking about the least restrictive environment. This concept is a principle that individuals with disabilities or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Basically, this requires students with disabilities to be included in the general education classroom with their peers that don't have disabilities. The only time they should be removed from the classroom is if their education can't be achieved satisfactorily. Um, the goal is to keep them in there with the use of supports as much as possible and only remove them from the classroom if absolutely necessary. So this graph over here kind of shows starting out in the general education classrooms, the least restrictive, moving on to a special education classroom, a special school, homebound, and then hospital residential facility. Those are the more advanced, uh, harder cases, so to speak. So the general education classroom is the ideal least restrictive environment. Um, in this classroom, we can provide different types of supports, whether they come from an aid, uh, assistive technology, accommodations, modifications, small group work, um, peer tutoring, or whatever it may be, whatever can help them stay as much as possible in the general education classroom. And they may use one of these, they may use a couple of them, or they use a combination of all of them. And then the special education classroom, this is for specialized instruction. They may have other students with similar learning needs involved in their classroom. So, for example, a speech therapy, there might be several students with different speech therapy needs, and so they all meet in the same classroom certain times throughout the day or through the week, and then return to their general education classroom as possible. More extreme cases, there might be students that are involved in a special education classroom all the time and don't really go to a general education class. Um, but as much as possible, we like to keep them in the general education classroom. Outside of programs outside the school, again, there's the homeschool, there's private school programs, and residential programs. These are extreme cases for the students where a general education classroom and special education classrooms just aren't appropriate for the student, or the school is not able to give them the appropriate services as well. Next, we move on to the education assessment process. This is a cycle. It's reoccurring. Once an IEP is established, it is looked at annually to see if it needs to be renewed or modified from the previous year. So the first phase is identification and referral. Second phase goes on to determination of eligibility. The phase 3 is program planning, and phase 4 is program implementation and evaluation. So in this first phase is that identification and referral. This is where the teacher screens their students with problems. They may examine prior year reports and school records and complete checklists on their students' current classroom work to see if there's any problems. Then they move on to a pre-referral step that can help determine the student is having a minor problem that can be addressed in the classroom through special adaptation, like we talked about in the last section, using modifications or assistive technology and stuff like that. If the student is deemed to need more assistance and services, then the teacher, along with other members of a special education team, discuss how to move forward with the referral, and then they notify the parents, because the parents must also be notified in writing, and they have to be present during the assessment. They have the right to be present during the assessments and have a voice in decisions made about their child's program. Next, they move on to the determination of eligibility. Through this, the team designs a individualized assessment plan. It should address the reason for the assessment, the steps and procedures being implemented in the assessment. It should also address the students' skills and abilities in the general education curriculum that they're struggling with and what is appropriate learning environment for them. They may also take into consideration their social, physical, and behavioral characteristics of the student as well. Again, the parents need to give permission for the assessment, and then once the permission is granted, the assessment is administered, scored, and interpreted by the team. The results are then reported to the parents at a meeting with the evaluation team, and the parents are told whether their child has a disability and what their eligibility is for services. Then we move on to the program planning. This is where the design of an individualized education program, or IEP, is put together. Within 30 days of the student being identified of having a disability, the assessment team, along with the parents, have an IEP meeting. Before the student can receive the services, the IEP must be developed and parents must agree to the plan. The team must explain in detail to the parents what the plan is and what their roles are in it as well. And then we move on to the program implementation and evaluation. So once the IEP has been approved and signed by the parents, it should be implemented as soon as possible. Every team member, teacher, or any service worker who has part of the plan, along with parents, must have access to the IEP, as well as any other educational staff that may find it useful for their delivery of curriculum to the student. It must have annual goals for the education program as well. From these goals, the evaluation of the progress can be determined through multiple assessment strategies. The IEP will also determine how the student will participate in state or district-wide assessments, what conditions they may be able to take these assessments under, and if there is any alternative assessments available for them, and then the IEP must be reviewed annually. Formal and informal assessment procedures will help gather information to determine if the goals were met and what needs to be modified if it continues. Okay. Next, we move on to we want to encourage the family to participate in the special education assessment process. There's different ways to do that. We want to encourage the family to be involved in the process, but we want to make sure that they understand what's going on. So if there is a communication issue between the educators and the family, we can always use a bilingual, bicultural, social cultural mediator to help with any barriers of communication. We can also provide written checklists and questionnaires to the parents to gain information from them, and also to provide them information on the special education assessment process. We also would like to encourage the families to participate in family-to-family support and networking, maybe talking with other parents who have students with similar learning needs and what their experience is with the IEP and special education programs. We also want to be respectful and flexible to the family's needs and wants, what they feel, taking into consideration what they feel is appropriate for their child as well. And another good thing we can do is provide examples of IEPs and IEPs with simple jargon ahead of time to provide an example of what to expect, kind of give them an idea if they're feeling leery of the situation. Here, give an example. Here, this is what it is. This is how the process works. This isn't what it will look like. So they kind of are put to ease, if you will. Next, we move on to derived scores, specifically percentile rank, standard score, and Stanines, and how they relate to the normal distribution. Derived scores are based off norm groups. If the norm group is very limited, the scores may not be very valid. Let me move my camera view here off of this one. So first we talk about the percentile rank. Basically, it is the percentage of students in the reference group or same age group scoring below a given raw score. This range in the percentile rank ranges from 1 to 99. So, for example, if a student's percentile rank is 85, that would mean that 85% of students in the reference group received a lower score than that student. I'm going to move on to the standard scores. Standard scores determine how many standard deviations a result is from the mean. Z is a standard score in this equation, is the standard score, X is the value of the element, this is the population mean, and this is the standard deviation. A score less than 0 represents an element loss, element less than the mean. A score greater than 0 represents the element greater than the mean. A score equal to 0 represents an element that is equal to the mean, and a score equal to 1 represents an element that is 1 standard deviation greater than the mean. And I have in a couple slides a comparison chart that can help with that. Next, we have the Stanines, which is short for standard 9. This is derived from a standard deviations and consists of 9 levels. The mean of this system is 5 and a standard deviation of 2. The score is rounded to the nearest whole number. So if we look down here, the result ranking, if they're in 4%, then they get a Stanine of 1, 7% is 2, and so forth. This would be the Stanine 1 is the poorest grade, and then up to 9 is the greatest. So then we talk about normal distribution. Normal distribution is based off, let's move up here. There we go. This is a bell curve. The mean, median, and mode are all at the same point on the curve. If the mean is there and the median and mode are not the same as the mean, that turns into a skewed normal distribution. So with the normal distribution, 68% of scores with one standard are within 1 standard deviation from the mean. 95% of scores are within 2 standard deviations from the mean, and 99% of scores are within 3. So here's the graph I was talking about. This kind of compares percentile ranks, standard scores, and the Stanine scores, and then the percentages in Stanine, and how they relate to the normal bell curve or the normal distribution. And so it's just kind of different ways of testing what you're looking for and how accurate you're trying to pin down results. And that is my presentation for the media clip final project. Thank you.